This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.
Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us once again Dr. Buck Melton, who many in the TV audience may know is a potential vice presidential candidate. And I'll say no more about it.
Waiting for the groundswell, huh?
Right. Well,
so.
I mean, maybe if you got some bumper stickers that might be available for.
Well, I'm backing Buck from a certain political campaign of...
You've got some in the basement.
Yes, a lot of them in the basement. So.
Well, good. That's good. Well, okay, so we've had some interesting conversations about freedom, and we've made reference to Norman Lincoln Rockwell's famous four freedoms, which he extracted from President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, as you pointed out. And so possibly we can talk about a famous one, which is fear from want, and you're getting enough to eat. And as I can recollect his painting, there were people sitting down, I guess, to Thanksgiving dinner. They were chowing down. So the idea is that in the world, you need that somebody somehow needs to give you basic necessities, which you could say would be water, air, food, shelter, maybe health. But those are basic necessities, and presumably somehow in the United States, this is going to happen, that you're going to get that protection. And if you were somewhere else, you would not receive it. Is that a fair appraisal of freedom from want?
I suppose so, although when you throw health in there, and of course there's been a huge debate over that in recent years, I can't help but think of the wonderful line from Shakespeare's Henry V, can he who commands the beggar's knee command the health of it?
Yes.
We all have to die of something. So
that's a rather profound thing, isn't it? Well, what I'm sort of trying to say is that somehow the United States, and thus the United States government, for American citizens, is one of the advantages of being here in America is that these freedoms exist. And one of the things that's going to happen is that you're going to have freedom from want. And the initial one would be food, but I would say, I would toss the other one in there. And you could say also, I think, and that's a point for another discussion, about health issues that's a sort of I would say it's a basic necessity approaching that for food. And we'll leave it at that. And the question to ask is, is that the case? And how does it happen that we'll start with food, that no one in the United States is going to go hungry, and presumably the government is going to prevent that from happening, and that you could say was a freedom, in that if you have enough to eat, presumably you can also write poetry and write cantatas and take photographs and go up mountains and say profound things and kiss your wife, whatever. Yes. The things that are there require food, and that's always been a basic human necessity and a way to control people, to people behave the way you wish if you have control of food. I'll also throw this out, is the word Lord. I mean, we often hear the word Lord, and it seems to be almost an un-American word. But certainly in the British Isles and other cultures, the word Lord, really going back to this old Anglo-Saxon turn of phrase, is the food giver. So a person is your Lord. He gives you food, and you have a relationship with the Lord. You get your food, and you're going to give the Lord your allegiance to receive that. So if the government is protecting our food, firstly, does it do that? Does anyone go hungry in the United States?
Well, I'm sure certainly a lot of people do. You talk about how many children go to bed, if not starving, certainly malnourished. But there is private charity. there are food stamps. Now, of course, private charity has been around forever. The churches have always been there. There was a big shift when the industrial era began, and you saw this massive disparity between the truly colossally rich and the impoverished, the wage slaves in the
Yes.
factories, for instance. And I think this was of great concern to Franklin Roosevelt's generation, well, to Theodore Roosevelt's generation too, but Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s and 40s is the one who said that. When he made that For Freedom speech, he was making it in the context of our fight against Nazi Germany and against totalitarianism. But I think he was drawing very heavily on his New Deal background against the economic problems that we had had in the preceding 10 to 12 years before that. I don't know, I'm not sure exactly how, once again, how traditionally American an idea that was, that Americans had largely been self-sufficient before the industrial era, that private charity was there to step in, and the idea that maybe the new system would produce this tremendous poverty and that people might not have enough of what they needed was fairly new, 40, 50, 60 years old. So I think that's what he had in mind. I want to project it forward a little bit to John F. Kennedy's inaugural address, 1961, when he said that things are different than they were in 1776 because now man has in his hands the ability to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. Human life, possibly, if the nuclear exchange were big enough. I think he was perhaps overstating the case there. I think he was certainly overstating the case when it came to human poverty. America, the land of plenty, could we really, with our resources, make sure that every human being goes to bed well fed all over the world every night? I don't think we've got that ability with us.
Well, and actually now we can bounce the basketball a bit on what want is. So humans presumably want lots of things. They're hard ingrained. I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. And there's maybe the biggest, maybe a better word would be need.
Need. Yes.
Need would be much better. What do you actually need? And so in general, if you looked at the situation, certainly in earlier times, people needed food just to stay alive. Particularly, I don't doubt that one of the issues that occurred in the Depression was very hard for many people to get enough food to eat. There were bread lines, different ways to do that. In general, the situation was somewhat cushioned by the subsistence farmers out there. You could grow food in your backyard. But the point is that in various times in our world, there have been periods where people did not get what they needed in order to survive. And most people would say, well, we need a system that would allow that to occur. And in general, it could be said that capitalism, unrestrained capitalism, could allow these circumstances to occur. It's possible, with no income redistribution, nothing. Well, people presumably occasionally could starve, particularly in times of economic stress, and the quid pro quo of capitalism would be we have a system where the charity, churches, whatever, private impulses make sure this doesn't happen. And if the private impulses go away, and it is happening, that people aren't getting the food they need, then it would be reasonable for some other entity to do that. The government would do that. And so I think most people would accept that in the United States, we certainly need the food you need and maybe other things that you, neutral observer, would say you need. Now, the issue that actually is taking place is human wants being never-ending. Really what we've got is an incredible amount of endogenous obesity. So the body mass index of Americans is some terrible number. People are overeating, they're eating the wrong things, they're being seduced by advertisements. They're getting the 3 Big Macs or whatever for breakfast, and it just keeps going and going. So there seems to be an abundance of food there. But what I think I'd want to get into a little bit is the idea of how the government can direct resources. Is that part of America? They're going to direct resources to make sure that, at the minimum, needs are taken care of, but the bigger question mark is wants taken care of.
Yes.
So just you could say, where do wants go? And it goes into a lot of things. You could say maybe you need health care, but maybe you want some, I don't know, some terrible perversions, I don't know, what presumably people want something to very coarse and, shall we say, unsavory. Maybe is the government going to let that to take place, which presumably they try and engender that. And when this happens, the quote, people really have an allegiance to the government and support the decision makers there. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? And what are your comments about that?
Yes, well, I think it was very important for you to point out that that freedom from want, that Roosevelt was using that in the more or less archaic sense, and the one that immediately comes to me is the 23rd Psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," and that is better translated as need, as opposed to something that would be fun to have, that would be diverting. You used the word perversion in a different context a moment ago, but I do think if you view freedom from want as I get anything that I would like to have, that is a perversion of the word want. Freedom from
and
need.
the government would be the engender of
Yes.
these perverse impulses.
Yes.
But and the quid pro quo would be the government could say, well, you could have whatever strange things you'd like, as long as you support the government and its power.
Well, I remember when Obama was elected, and during the middle of a big recession, and of course Obama was a Democrat, and the Democratic Party is, I think it is safe to say, it is more the party of redistribution,
Yes.
and probably always has been. But I remember the Republicans putting out a cartoon or a meme that showed Obama getting elected and people standing there waving at him and holding out their hands. And it said, "Obama's president now, where's my free stuff?"
Yeah.
That is not what freedom of want was originally intended to be. And I don't think that the government has the wherewithal to support that redefining of the term. I just don't think the pockets are deep enough, especially with us running a $23 trillion debt, or 22?
It's a big number.
Yes. So.
Well, really, we can sail the ship into, so the government presumably is there, and these protectors, and we're going to surrender a lot of authority and indeed wealth to the government to do these things, and we trust they're going to be honest benefactors. But the real
Silly
question,
idea.
right? Well, that's right, and they only work if we're able to keep a very close eye on powerful people. If we can't do that, if there's not transparency, we can't do that. There are different encumbrances about that. I think it's really good the two-party system is there.
But if
But
if I can interject there, the source of constant amazement to me, and Americans really ought to ponder this, and you and I have talked about this before, is that when Congress's approval rating, the lawmakers' approval rating, is in the low double digits, and sometimes in the last 5 to 10 years have dipped down into the single digits.
Yes.
And yet we overwhelmingly re-elect these people in 60 or 70 or 80% turnover.
Yes.
Something is very, very wrong there. Why do we keep electing these people who are going to destroy us with a national debt, whom polls say we don't even like? And yet we keep returning them to jobs that are frankly very lucrative.
Yes,
and
in the
filled
end,
with
the end of
perks.
the way, well,
So-
I mean, we won't get into how
Yes.
politicians are compensated. It's really quite a subject that requires more attention.
Yes.
But I think the point is the political system is whatever it is, and I think you make the point, sort of, that people will put in or nefarious, untrustworthy people, at least they think that, with the idea they're going to get some profound benefits from that person. And it's the devil you know, that kind of thing. So that's there. Question I would ask would be, in regards to this whole freedom, the question is, what is required from the average citizen in order to have this, quote, freedom from hunger or want, and I think we probed the word want a bit, but it's part of the social contract, I think. And I think it's a useful, reasonable thing to do. An external observer would say, well, yes, I think it is reasonable that if you're part of this group of people that you're going to surrender something, and there's going to be some kind of rebalancing or a certain degree of redistribution, unless the private community would do that reasonably. And I don't think they have the wherewithal to do that. It doesn't appear to be that way. But if it can be done in a reasonable fashion, okay. The question to ask is, what's the deal there? So is the deal that you're going to have all these things? Does it mean that you're going to fight in the army? Are you going to become a soldier and defend the situation? Or are you going to work overtime at a munitions factory? Are you going to criticize a person that's not working hard enough and turn them in? This person's not working hard enough. What are you going to do to get these benefits? And that, I think, needs to be spelled out in more detail. And just to continue on the subject, each person has their own individual social contract, I think. So if you're born into great wealth, then your deal is you're going to have, I don't know, your own jet plane and whatever, and on, and there might not be too much you have to really put in the hopper. That's just the way the deal is. Or similarly, if you're a tremendous, I don't know, you're 7.5 feet tall and you can shoot three-pointers with your left hand with your eyes closed, okay, maybe not. Your situation will be much better. But each person has their own situation. And how is that really parsed out? I mean, how do you distribute things for these freedoms, and how does the government do it? And what do you need to eat? Do you need everybody gets, I don't know, a lot of lettuce, I don't know, maybe that's healthy, or broccoli, huge bowls of broccoli, is that what the government gives you for free, or do you get an occasional steak? What's the deal? And the same with health care, I think, which I believe is part of, I would submit that this would be part of the social contract, and what degree of benefit do you get without any, you're not going to personally pay for it. You don't have the ability to do that. It'll be paid for with a redistribution of wealth. And should there be differences there? Should there be a difference in the way society parses things out? So if you have freedom from want, that's such a general word, and it hasn't, in this painting and in this political statement, exactly how that's parsed out for each person is not too clearly established. Yes. And that would turn out to be a big deal, and it's really a huge part of societal tension, is it not, as to how that happens?
Well, you know, the phrase, and I don't know if this was Marx or Lenin, but from each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. I mean, obviously that's a Marxist-Leninist underpinning, but I think at some level that's not incompatible with capitalism.
Nor with Christianity.
Indeed. And yet it can be perverted. A certain congresswoman floated something several months ago in a draft form, and there's been a lot of speculation as to whether or not it was intentional, but it stated something absolutely mind-boggling, that we need to give a basic living wage to people, essentially it said to people who don't feel like working.
Yes.
I don't think any rational, sane person could see that as anything other than a recipe for utter disaster, as injuring the growth of the economy and the ability for us all to be free from want someday. So it was the height of irresponsibility even to pen those words. We all have to put something in if we are going to be entitled to that basic subsistence.
Well, we sort of haven't gotten so much into it, sort of the complicated idea or concept, but the social contract, what people do or don't, what's appropriate, and indeed, you could say the people are injured. I mean, I certainly observe this. People that have too much are injured by it, and they, for whatever reason, they are born into, great wealth. They can be injured, maybe is another way to phrase it. So many times our people don't have the impulses to contribute which is a really blessing, I think, is the ability, I want to help people, I want to do this, or I want to indirectly, whatever, I want to help my family. I feel like I've societal responsibilities very close to a good part of human nature. So if this redistribution gets disturbed, then all kinds of things happen. Now, you mentioned sort of the guaranteed income, and that's actually been tried in a few places, and you could, it's certainly, well, in Cuba, communist countries, I know a little of the Cuban situation, but there is a guaranteed income there, kind of like unemployment benefits, but you don't really have to work. There's not enough to make it, you starve on the stuff that's out there. Here's your $5. I think the Finns have tried that. That's been the Finnish people tried it as an experiment. It's sort of underway. I don't think it's working out that well. But the idea was, and I could see the merit to it, if you want to say it that way, if there's so much confusion and I guess inefficiencies, getting these basic, if we say that part of the social contract is you'll get enough broccoli to live on, or we'll find some way that you can live in a heated house or whatever in the winter, and we'll do something for you, some kind of pretty low basic thing. It's sort of there now, but the system is, it's very inefficient and confused, and people would say, some economists might say this, let's just stop the whole process by which people get workers' compensation. Let's stop the disability, whatever. You get enough walking around here to live, and that's about it. And what happens when you don't get anything else? It's just a very low level of anything. It's pretty miserable, but you won't starve on the street. I guess that's the idea. Now, how it works is another matter.
Yes.
I mean, obviously it has a downside to it, in that one reason people work hard, it's sort of a slightly sinister part of it, but it's a little ego. I'm better than you are because I'm working 100 hours a week and I'm making some money and I've got a new car, and you're just in the gutter there, and it's sort of, it improves my sense of my personal worth. So I wouldn't like it if you were not in the gutter, you were sitting on this curbside.
Well, I'm not sure that's a weakness in the great scheme of things. For all of its ugliness and all of its failings, capitalism has one tremendous advantage. And can you name any other system that has been as productive of wealth and of prosperity as capitalism? I just don't think you can find it. It's the harnessing of individual greed.
I think I agree with that, but you've sailed the ship into property, which is another part of the whole deal here. We go back is part of the want. Is that access to property? Is that obtaining property? And in making sure this is present, should property be diminished? Is property a good or a bad thing? Is wealth a good or a bad thing? And we mentioned sort of where equality comes in the situation. But some people would say, well, I agree with you. Capitalism is going to produce, tremendous wealth, tremendous property, but I don't care about that. I don't care what's that. What matters to me is that everyone has the same small amount. And if that's all we need, and that's all we should have, and if we all have the same amount, it'll be like paradise. It won't matter if that would be the side on the other side. And once again, I make reference to Cuba, was right where it's close to us. And I would say the ideologues in the Communist Party there, that's sort of their belief, though actually the people laugh at that. I would phrase it that way. The humans laugh at the idea that you're going to have this rigorously equality. It's very hard to maintain it. It's against human nature.
Well, let's try that on. You obviously personally believe that access to health care is a tremendously important right, that it comes into that umbrella of freedom.
And I'll quickly add one thing. The caveat of that is responsibility, and so it's part of this this social contract. So that's kind of where all these freedoms are coming from. There are responsibilities, and some kind of contractual arrangement needs to take place between the individual and the government and society.
Of course.
But okay, all right.
Of course, but let's try it. So let's
took
try it on you to see if you're going to put your money where your mouth is. Our basic subsistence level of health care, you get one prescription a year. That's it.
Yes.
No matter how young, how old, how well, how ill you are you willing to accept that world?
Well, you could say the system could be made more efficient. It can be more efficiently done.
Is that a
but
yes or
I'm
no?
not saying, well, let me rephrase
Yeah.
that. All right. So everything has a caveat attached to it. But I do believe it's in society's best interest for people to have a certain security about their health circumstances, which requires, on their part, a lot of responsibility, to do that. And so if the two go together, it could sort of work out. And the other question would be, should there be gradations in healthcare access, and how should those gradations play themselves out? And so I think everywhere in the world, access to the highest and most expensive kinds of healthcare, it's tricky to get there. And in the communist world, where people allegedly have these privileges, the big dogs get them. Everything is equal, but if you're a Communist Party member, you go to the head of the line. And if you're a very wealthy person, you get the same arrangement. And one little vignette is I knew this guy, who's a very rich guy, who was supporting sort of care for all. And I said, well, you know, what may happen is you may get Medicaid. It may not be, so it may be such a reduced thing. Are you going to sit in the go sit in the clinic chair for 8 hours and wait your turn for whatever reason? And he said, no, what I'm going to do is go to Europe. So I will go, it won't be for me.
It'll be for the little people.
It'll be, right, everybody else can be there. So that is a question, which I think your question it goes to, is to what limits would people accept if there's going to be care for all? What kind should appropriately there be gradations?
Right.
Should, for instance, small children get more care than old people like me? I mean, is that a fair thing? Or should I don't know, if a valuable societal person, should that get more care? Or should a rich person that's obtained money in nefarious ways, should they get better care? And then the bigger question to ask is, and I think these moral issues will come up after we're underground, I believe. But one story would be, what about national borders? We have these artificial national borders. So is it right for an American to just get whatever? Let's say OB care. Well, you know, you're going to have 64 visits with the obstetrician. You're going to get a good healthy baby out of it. We'll do everything will be there. On one side of the border, that's the case. On the other side, where most of the people are, they're condemned to very poor circumstances. So right now, the question is, if you have these four freedoms, is there, and you believe in that, you believe we have some kind of social contract, is there a difference depending on your nationality and what nation state you're in? And later, it won't be for our generation, but I don't think. But other people will say, well, the great evil, which people would say, well, in Macon in 1960, there was segregation or whatever. Well, in America, in 2019, we allow our wealth to have Americans getting better care or treatment or life than somewhere in Bangladesh. And that's a primary human failing, and if you take the point. And so there's sort of a roundabout answer about your initial question, would I accept one? Yeah, go ahead.
I want to come back to that. Now,
well, after my long circle,
after your long circle,
which I didn't answer, I'd be a good politician. Yes. Maybe I could be one of your campaign managers.
Well, your
since
long,
I didn't answer your question, I'd be a good politician.
Well, your long circle of 5 minutes. Now I'm going to say go back and do that entire spiel again. And every time you said health care, substitute food.
Yes.
Any difference?
Only in the expense issues. Only the expense issues. So, which is another point. is that healthcare which maybe we should have another session on that. But healthcare is so expensive and is getting more so.
Yes.
And there could be a way to have it far less expensive. If we said we want to make the decision, yes, you can have aspirin. That's what you get. You get aspirin, that'll work pretty well. You get aspirin and statins, maybe. That's about it. If you get cancer, too bad. And we'll have some soma, some narcotics for you and whatever.
Yes. Well, and my finishing comment would be, if you're getting the aspirin or one prescription for something a year, since we know that there is the technological ability that other prescriptions are there that could save my life, I am not going to be satisfied with one a year. I'm going to say, let's do what's necessary for more, and that would mean we have to work for it. Back to capitalism.
Yes, and work turns out to be a complicated word.
Where's my free stuff? Doesn't work.
What is work?
Yes.
I'll let that go for now. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Buck. Good. I see. Do you get a place in the White House if you're the vice president?
Naval Observatory.
You don't live in the White. You don't have a little.
I may have a small office.
A small
there.
apartment there in the back.
I think there may be an office there, but my residence would be the Naval Observatory.
You don't have a garage apartment or anything. No, we're just checking.
No.
Okay. Well, thank you once again, Buck. Thanks for being with us. Yes.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.